Well, so here we are talking about the final part of another Dostoevsky novel, but this time with all the preceding parts having been recorded. And so I guess our listeners, we're not giving them the experience of FOMO that we really wanted to give them. I think when we started with The Adolescent, was that the one that we only did the last chapter on? Okay. Well, guys, I said in the pre-show, which was really interesting, and Justin was talking about how when he listens to podcasts that seem to have started in the middle of a conversation, he always feels sort of annoyed that they didn't give him that whole conversation and how they led up to that. And so at the very least, we can give you the FOMO that indicates or that we do a pre-show, and there is definitely always probably some of the more interesting things we say happen in the pre or the post show. That said, the notes I have here are okay. So my big time questions are: and did Ivan ruin himself, or did Smerdyakov ruin him through the part that it turns out that he played in the death of his father? And I really want to know what you guys think about that. And if you want to parse that out, that'd be very helpful. Babcock, this is, I know, especially your territory, but obviously this goes out to everybody. Is this like an Edgar and Edmund take from King Lear? Hamlet actually gets mentioned. And there are a couple of interesting meta commentaries here. The novelist gets mentioned once or twice, the novelist itself, but then both the prosecutor and the defending attorney accuse each other of novelistic tendencies and even poetic tendencies. And so it's sometimes considered like a big deal when Dante gets named or calls himself a poet or calls his poem a sacred poem in the poem itself. And so this is, the magnum opus of Dostoevsky. And maybe now we're in a good position to see whether that's actually true. Um, uh, is he is he attaining to Shakespearean heights? Is he mentioning himself? Uh, is he putting himself into the novel, making some commentary on the novel in sort of a Tempest or Inferno or Ulysses like way? Um, uh, okay. The speeches of Gruschenka and Katerina Ivanovna, and the second speech, of course, by Katerina. This is the courtroom drama. Ivan and Alyosha's speech. I feel like we might want to mention the prosecutor and the defender's speech, and then the prosecutor's yelling again. Oh my gosh. And then the opinion that he got crushed by everybody. But then and his name is Hippolyte. So I really wanted to bring that up, that we actually got a speech by an Hippolyte that we could stomach. I remember I wish we would have been recording during the idiot, but you both had a particular disdain for Hippolyte.
Yeah, that guy.
I think Wes even hated him. And let me see. Okay, and so here I guess is my second big question. Does Katerina Ivanovna get Mitya and also Grushenka back for the insults that they gave to her? The Grushenka gave her earlier, and of course the loan that Mitya took in order to then go sleep, be with Grushenka and throw a party for her with his fiance's money, and which she thought nobody would be so shameless as to do, but he's a Karamazov. Finally, when and finally when Mitya is waiting for Katya in this like Fido like moment where they're trying to get him to escape, right? And is he a Socrates like figure? It was a question I was going to ask. Just like at the very end, we get Alyosha with these kids and Kolya and cheers for Karamazov.
Karamazov.
What is he supposed to be here? And Ivan's supposed to be the best of them, according to Mitya, and he'll heal from the brain fever. But both of them got brain fever. So we should talk about brain fever, I guess. If women are being very neurotic at this time, men are getting brain fever, I guess. And yeah, and I guess it also ends with a funeral, but also a resurrection, or at least mention of the resurrection. So I guess the global question is this the greatest work that we've read by Dostoevsky? And do you want to get into any of those details? And Wes will be here soon enough, but it's a little bit earlier where he is, and he had a dinner to go to, and so he'll be here at some undisclosed moment. This is how we like to do it.
Well, as a small thing, it made me think of in regards to brain fever. What was it? The word that that older lady was kept using. Um, Lisa's mom. I
Madame Koklikov.
yeah, Madame Kolkakov. She was like really hammering it home, saying that it's a new psychological term, and it makes so much sense that. And it started with an R, and I'm completely blanking on the word that she was using when she was talking to Alyosha when she kind of held him captive, but it was akin to brain fever, but it was like a technical term that they were using at the time.
I don't remember that. I don't remember.
Yeah, it may not be important, but it was introduced like so much earlier than the actual trial. Uh, it made me think of it.
Um, so I was thinking about yeah, like reading all these back to back like this. It definitely feels like it's uh it's like all of his previous ideas wrapped into one story
Yeah.
from the notes from a dead house on. Um,
I mean, you even
Yeah,
get the reference to the idiot. I'm a sick man, right?
of course.
Like it's
Yeah.
actually literally included in here. It's like
Yeah.
characters from his former novels
Yeah.
given stage in this, ultimate.
Yeah. And the you mentioned, the novels put in, it made me think about, you know, uh is it Daedalus's theory that Shakespeare, what is the whole bit about Shakespeare as his own father or something like that, right? By playing the ghost, like some,
Absence. I could get
yeah,
a little bit, but yes, he basically makes you can be a ghost by just not being somewhere. There.
yeah, yeah. So like clearly, the yeah, he's putting himself in the story. Yeah, I really enjoyed this book a second time. I don't know about more so, but in a very different way. Like on some commentary I had about this idea of the trial being the thing around which it's all focused, and it's like sort of thumbing his nose and making fun of the genre fiction of the day of the, like, 19th century Victorian era. Um, Kind of a sprawling novel about this like crime, um, and then the 20th century sort of obsession with this kind of type of work where it's like who committed this crime. And I mean, he presents this entire masterwork on, like, you can't answer that question in a 150-page novel. Like you need to understand who every single one of these characters and players are. um I've been thinking a lot about the Smerdyakov and Ivan dynamic from your question, Alex. I mean, I think it's Ivan, right? Like, I mean, it's very oh God, what's the Tropimovich, right? Stepan Tropimovich from
Yeah.
Demons, right? He brings with him this like idea that's a virus, which is similar to Raskolnikov again, right? Same thing. It's like this idea, and he has that vision at the end about this virus that infects people and makes them think that they know what's right.
Just like I think Smerdyakov is like Shatov, the former serf.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, 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 yeah,
and
yeah,
also, it's a very similar reason for committing suicide. Uh,
yeah,
uh,
yeah. And
but
they're also an embodiment of you- um the intellectual's radical ideas, right? So it's like, okay, so you have these ideas,
they
uh,
really
uh um
get to him. They get to him.
yeah,
Everything is permitted. He keeps.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like you have these ideas, then they're ideas in your head, but they're actions in my body. Like, I'm gonna make it happen. So but I think there's source is in the head. I don't think it's in the. I don't know.
I
Well,
think it makes sense for to be in the head because he is the intellectual one. It's like he's so overburdened by what he almost narrowly thinks the world should be that he's drowned out the passion part of his Karamazov nature. And here it comes roaring back when it's clear through all reasonable doubt that it's not as good as he thinks it is.
that's Smerdyakov.
Well, Ivan, I mean, but based on Smirnikov's actions.
Ah, well, so what do you think about the mechanism of his? So both times he chooses not to act in the opportune moment. He leaves that first time after talking to Smerdyakov, and then when he finds out about him, instead of going immediately to the authorities or dragging Smerdyakov with him, he waits. And both times he describes like not totally being in control of himself, like, and then he left and he didn't know why, and he did nothing. Like, what? Is that like a turning of Pharaoh's heart to so if I want to read this like a Christian theological reading, is this like God using him to do his will and also punishing him for his intellectualism, and also punishing Smerdyakov for his intellectualism in the same way, by making them complicit in the same crime? Or I so that's only one way to read it. Or does he seems offended when he hears that he could stand to make quite a bit of money from this, and when
Oh,
he
a lot of money.
a lot of money, like 40 to 60,000 kopecks or whatever, or a lot of
Oh,
money
rubles. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
even. And let me see, at the trial he said, but at the trial he gives like a much more biblical sort of response. He says, who wouldn't want to kill his father?
Yeah.
I wanted to kill
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So when he hesitates, again, Nietzsche says Dostoevsky is the only psychologist he needed to read, and he brings up psychology over and over again in the trial. But is he here illustrating an unconscious response by Ivan? Ivan seems to unconsciously want to bring this about. But for what reason? Money, or archetypally to kill his father, or to prove his theory? Is he also like a Raskolnikov or a Stavrogan? But then now he is with his brain fever and this odd unconscious hesitation. Is he also showing himself subject to human nature?
I mean, I think it's all those things wrapped up in all the characters, right? Like none of the three can escape themselves, much like none of us can escape ourselves.
I too am a Karamazov.
I too am a Karamazov, exactly right. Yeah, but I all
These from now on, and
yeah. Whatever.
Saying, forgive me, I'm a sinner.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But I was struck by the Devil's lines about like there'd be no events in the world without me, you know? So I kind of wonder about that idea of for why does Ivan leave? It's like I don't know. It's like just pure humanity. Like why are we the way we are? It's
well, do you think Smerdyakov actually thought that Ivan understood him through his hints and winks, or was he just trying to implicate Ivan and to exonerate himself by suggesting that Ivan was the one who came up with the plan? Was it actually Smerdyakov who came up with the plan, knew where the money was, and then suggested that but it was actually you, Ivan?
I think I think I read it as if Smerdyakov came up with a plan, but is essentially telling Ivan, Ivan is so dumb to think that he can't, he thinks he's so smart. Like that's the whole thing, is that it's not that whether or not he is smart, it's that he thinks he's smart. Because that's part of the reason why this is fresh for me, is that like
They all do, right? Then one's got God, couple don't have God.
well, yeah, but I just finished reading Crime and Punishment with my students, and it's like, so we were just talking about the dream, and I think I forgot that the language of the dream, the vision, it's that everybody thinks they're correct, and then they also lose their ability to discern between good and evil as a result of that. So I think that's kind of what's happened to Ivan, is that he's so arrogant that he doesn't think he could be wrong, but he also doesn't understand what his theory even means, or at least he won't let himself be conscious to it. So maybe that's the idea, is that Smerdyakov just represents that gap, right? When he says, of course you knew. Like, what else could this be?
Yeah, I thought for a moment in that scene where he's kind of, confessing Smerdyakov, that he was almost seeking the approval. Like, you had to have known. Like, I do what I was supposed to.
Exactly. Right. If anything is permitted, killing this guy
Mm-hmm.
is definitely permitted.
Mm-hmm.
It's like purge logic. He's like, I was talking to you and listening to you this whole time. It's a lot like Shatov. He's like, I'm a true believer.
Mm-hmm.
You, Stavrogan, are not a true believer. You talked, but that was always the Fyodor in him, the father in him, that he's a shit talker. He's a smack, but he's a highly intellectual one. He likes to deracinate people and show them to be lacking in their reasoning, but that doesn't mean that he has a greater understanding of the nature of, say, an organism as opposed to an organization, like we talked about, like a whole that is so complicated that
Yeah.
it takes the use of your intellect your whole life just to know some part of it. But he spends his time ridiculing, like a sophist, people who aren't as smart as he is. Smerdyakov, well, he's trying to learn some French, right? And he's talking to this girl, and he wants to reinvent.
Got a little guitar.
He's overcome by envy and pride in some ways because of his low and yet high birth. He a nobleman father who but disavows him, but then stinking Elizabeth, as she's called, as his mother. And so he's like revolted by his mother, but proud of the gentleman heritage that he has, while also proud of Ivan, but also deeply envious of all three of the inherited ones, which makes one think that A, he might want some money to reinvent himself, but B, he might also want to ruin them in that Karamazov fashion, that like Mitya and the father have that capacity towards just ruining things. Ivan, too, I would say, with his strange liaisons with Katerina Ivanovna, and right when I asked that funny question last time, wouldn't that just be an Ivan thing to do if he were actually following through on his everything were permitted philosophy? But I think that also shows, like when with the possessed, like the dangerousness of some of these imported Western educated ideas when shared with people who want to put things into practice. And this part of the prosecutor's speech, right? He's like, this is not a weird thing now, this Karamazov murder. There are many weirder things, but we're not trying to normalize this right now.
Yeah.
He gives like a sociological argument.
There was something else that I kind of thought of between Ivan and Smerdyakov. There's very like biblical reference because they're always in a garden, like, and they're both kind of serpenty, but a little towards each other.
You don't see like Cain and Abel with them. You see the serpent. I like that.
Well, even before that, because Babcock, when you were saying earlier about his arrogance, like, what is the fall? What is knowing good and evil? It's being able to say, I can discern what is right and what is wrong, not what God can discern. And that's the ultimate knowing what good and evil is, separate from what you've been told. so to say, well, everything is permitted is like the ultimate, I know what's good or beyond good, so to speak. But I was just kind of struck by, there's this garden where all this stuff takes place. And is Smerdyakov the snake, or is he the one that, or is Ivan the snake that kind of gave the poison words?
Well, that you're calling back to something that I don't remember what we were reading. Oh no, it must have been Demons, I think, just based on the content. And Alex, you had a line that I actually wrote down in my notebook, and I use it when I talk about Hamlet. We just did, which is that you can believe in demons or not, but there are things inside of us that are worse than any sort of demon you could imagine. And I think, like the snake is just representative of the thing inside of us that causes us to do bad things. And so, I mean, in the same way, Ivan's confrontation with the devil is a conversation with Smerdyakov and a confrontation with himself, which is also tied to his father, right? So it's like he's sending out this lackey to do what he wants to do but can't bring himself to do, which is kill his own father, which is kill part of himself that he doesn't like.
It's, you're making me think it's almost like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky fashion, that it is a representation of the snake in all these characters. Obviously, we need to talk about how Katerina Ivanovna and Gruschenka called themselves wicked to each other and said forgiveness is beyond them. I think it was Gruschenka who said that. But in the same way that Tolstoy said, well, there's no such thing as a great man. They're just all these confluence of events, and it's just these great men are just part of the whole determined outcome of all of that. That the snake is not in one character, but like we're seeing the evil or the original sin or manifest over and over, and what the consequences of this are. Like the dad trying to go after the son's girl, partially caused that. Many hands were involved in the causing of this tragedy. It's not so much a tragedy like, oh my God, this happened out of nowhere, so much as a manifestation of all the little evils that lead to a big evil. And so much so that I think that the prosecutor and the defendant both make very good cases that you would think that there would be more of a 12 Angry Men situation with the jurors. No, guilty, 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 20 years hard labor.
Yeah, they were all peasants.
Yeah, and they finally got to speak.
The peasants stood up. Yeah, right.
But I mean, it's like, but everybody thought that the defense attorney killed it, that he crushed Hippolyte, and yet,
well, he killed Hippolyte literally, right? Hippolyte dies 9 months later from consumption.
Yeah. This was his time to shine.
Another small detail I think along these lines is that Smerdyakov is always called the lackey.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just kind of like this assistant, this factotum, this like he just does what he's told, right? So it's like he's just an extension of their wills.
Well, he's
or at least Ivan's will.
So
he's uneducated, yeah, right.
So he's got this, mind. He's got the same father as Ivan, which is, partially what makes Ivan Ivan, and so he like puts on airs because he's got this great potential, but it's just totally unactualized and makes him terrible. We've talked about real world examples of this, but us knowing Johnnies and some GIs, like some of them are so smart, but they don't end up doing as much with their minds as perhaps their aspirations and potential would have suggested they were capable, and they can become sort of insufferably pompous. And so Smerdyakov, you can see, yeah, so he's pompous, he's envious. You could see why through these vicious feelings he might want to kill or to ruin or to destroy the whole family if he possibly can. Did we get his feelings on Alyosha, or is it just Ivan and Mitya and the father that he had such a strong reaction to?
If it was, I don't recall. anything specific on that.
Neither do I. That's sort of interesting because
Hmm.
he has such a relationship with Yvonne, and then also such a strange relationship with the signs with Mitya. He's like a double agent for Mitya.
Hmm.
But then he's actually a triple agent because he's actually working for himself and ends up framing Mitya. But so, well, okay. So what about his suicide and that note he leaves? I exterminate myself just to exterminate myself, not to implicate anybody else in this. And, is he again one of these like strange nihilist philosophers proving his nihilism? Why did he kill himself after that conversation with Yvonne, where he seemed pretty arrogant and pretty in control?
Was it Shatov in Demons who was supposed to kill himself, and
Yeah,
they were trying to force him to, right? Or was that a different guy?
I think it was Shatov.
Wasn't there a Pyotr guy that they attacked and they were gonna make him kill himself? Trying to remember.
There was the person who was going to do it for philosophy, and Piotr went to him and was like, "Do it," and he's like, "No, not because you're telling me
Yeah,
to do it.
yeah,
I want to do it." And then
that's what I'm talking about. And there was the whole thing, he bit his finger, right?
he bit his finger. I'm like, that,
And
which
it was that, not the idiot where they dragged the dude off by the swamp, or not the swamp, but the pond, and murdered him. That's Demons, right? That's part of that same whole plot. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yes,
I'm forgetting who those.
I'm
I'm
like
forgetting who.
that actually might have been Shatov who
I
gets
think that was Shatov who
yes,
gets
his
killed.
wife comes back to him after
Yeah,
doing
yeah, yeah,
last
yeah,
time
yeah, yeah,
around.
yeah.
Oh, just as a side note to what I was mentioning earlier about that term. So there were a few chapters I listened to at work, and it was the Garnett translation, not the Peaver one, and she used a completely different
Mm,
word. Uh,
mm,
in this one, they just say fit of passion. They don't use the word that was being used, but well, I looked it up, and the word that she used in the Garnett translation is a Russian legal term at the time for declared insanity.
mm.
Uh, anyway, that was the connection that I was making. Just that it was, in a way, it was foreshadowed because she was like, "No, Lisa's, affected by these fits of passion too," and like, da 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 da.
Well, thank
Just
goodness I was looking for it, and I it was tough to find because it wasn't there. But yeah, it wasn't in the Peviar and Volokonsky. What was the word though, out of curiosity's sake?
I couldn't find a direct translation when I was just kind of perusing, but it's a Russian word that essentially means like affected, but the way
What
that
was
they
the
used
word
it.
itself in the book?
Oh, in our book, they just say fit of passion.
I know, in the Garnet.
That's the one I can't think of.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay, yes. Well, I'll be interested to know what the word was in the Garnet. Uh,
Touched in the head, as they say. Um, to your question about Smerdyakov, I think um, yeah, I don't know. He's I mean, his suicide, it's like a closed cul-de-sac, right? It's a loop on itself. So he's a easy solution to the problem of who killed Fyodor, because it's a answer that doesn't matter in a way. Like, it's none of these brothers. None of them did it.
Everybody considers that too convenient as a legal solution too, right? Like, oh, blame the dead guy.
Yeah, right,
Of
right,
course,
right.
that's easy.
And if there were a sixth person, you'd blame him, right? If there was someone else that was possible, you just blame him. So I think
Is that
he
kind of like the final screw you guys?
yeah, I think so. Yes, that's what I think the suicide is, at least for Ivan. I mean, it's what drives Ivan. Like, it pushes him over the edge, right? Like, I think without suicide, I think Ivan doesn't have brain fever. I think he suffers, but not with brain fever. I think that's like he's kind of loses it as a result of yeah, the fact that, like, there's no one to, like, because he can say I did it, or he could say Smerdyakov did it, and without Smerdyakov living, there's no way to prove it.
Right.
So in some ways, it's almost like
What do
an
you?
embodiment of the faith that he doesn't feel like he can have, right? It's like,
Yeah. And for an intellectual like him, not being able to
right,
prove something that he
right,
knows is true.
right.
I think he. what he also does, though, is he makes him complicit and thus solidifies his role in the death of his father, regardless of whether he knew it or not, and thus subjects him to the psychological sort of fury of fraud and complicity and murder.
Yeah.
And he's like, actually, I'm going to kill myself so that you're still effed because you're not going to be able to prove that it wasn't your brother. And so it will have been your fault that he went to jail and
The
that.
way he almost proves, hey, Yvonne, I'm smarter than you.
No, that's right. No, see, that's exactly what I'm wondering. Right.
Yeah. And all the money that you're going to get is also blood money now. Like you
have the Furies on you.
Yeah.
You have the weight of human nature, as Severus would say from Mrs. Dalloway. But that's the thing that characters in Dostoevsky get, right? Raskolnikov gets the weight of human nature so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Wes, we're just now talking about characters being afflicted by human nature and how Smerdyakov may have orchestrated the complicity of Yvonne rather than Yvonne knowingly or unknowingly being complicit in the murder of his father. But in Smerdyakov killing himself, he made sure that that Mitya would be convicted and that Yvonne would therefore have played a role in both the death of his father and the fraudulent conviction of his brother, and then would have to bear the weight. I'm describing it as a fury, like when Clytemnestra is killed by her son, and him having to go through that, Orestes, and whether that and Justin just broached, so is that Smerdyakov showing that he's actually smarter than Yvonne?
So it's like the reveal at the end of a heist movie, right? It's like
or he gets up at the end of Saw, and
you get to see how it played out, and you're like, oh, was I right or was I wrong?
Yeah.
And also, welcome.
I like that theory. Yeah. Well, hello. Yeah. Hello. Sorry, I'm late. I have not thought of it that way. But it makes sense of the otherwise pretty abrupt self-offing that Smerdyakov does there. I don't know another good way to account for that other than that he's using it as a weapon of some kind. I've never known quite what to make of his abrupt suicide there.
The only other way that I could think of it that I don't think is right, but almost like a perverse redemption. Like we don't see any of it in text, but if he suddenly felt a moral conscience, but then it's not a redemption, but it would be he receives the morality and then I have to punish myself. But like I said, I don't think that's there, but for a bit I wanted to read it that way.
That is in line with the Dostoevsky kind of thing that he does to his characters, right? They take on kind of physical ill effects when they've done morally depraved things. It seems like, it's Stavrogan, right? The suicide of Stavrogan.
Redemption doesn't quite seem right, but like justice, right? It's like the because
which is apparently epilepsy, and they say that there's like some sort of moral component to that, or they make that claim here. It's interesting how wrapped up in this theory of psychology and morality, and how people lose their psychic health in the wake of these crimes that they rationalistically don't account for. It's like all of a sudden they find themselves in a Cain and Abel situation, or a Hamlet situation, or an Edmund and Edgar situation, and they just thought they were, having drinks. But they're, ultimately you're across from Cain and you're Abel. So
I think there's some evidence for that, because at a certain point, I felt like it was kind of in passing, but they said, oh, and Smerdyakov had so many fits that for such a long time, doctors were actually interested in it. And this was after the murder. So it's hinted that he's completely breaking down. And at first I thought to myself, is he putting it on so that he has an alibi? because he had kind of mentioned something like that earlier, like I can make this happen.
Right. He seemed to know
But
about it, and they claimed that that's not a real thing.
yeah,
That
Um, one thing that I just want to say about the way that Dostoevsky himself constructs it is it's really well done in that like you don't know that he did it until he finally admits it to Ivan
that's
for
right.
sure.
That's right. It
Because
seemed
it's like the like in the scene there's the gap, right? And then like it's definitely possible Mitya did it.
yeah.
Like all the
yeah,
evidence
yeah,
points at him.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
We
The
all
evidence is there.
talking like it was Mitya. Like he was saying these absurd things about 1500 like
Yeah.
so we got to hear it like how all the people in the courtroom heard it. They're like, yeah, man, great speech, defending attorney and all, but 1500
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's pretty
yes,
He
and
was so haughty with the when he was first being interrogated, like, yeah, just write it down, whatever.
it's pretty obviously him. Like like in terms of evidence, it's like
that letter.
who else could it be? Exactly right. The letter is like, well, duh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
But
okay. So okay. Let me ask this question of you then, Babcock, and also you, Wes, and also you, Justin. But I know that these two especially like this. Is Smerdyakov Iago?
Is he the what now?
no, no,
Is he?
because Iago. So that's funny. I'm also teaching Othello to my one of my classes. Iago is pure irrational hate or just a force of violence rather than enacting justice, and he puts in to Othello's head the idea of jealousy. So like you could say, well, he represents some sort of vice embodied and he brings it out of Othello. It must have been there to begin with. Okay, fine.
I mean,
But Ivan thinks before the action happens, whereas Iago brings it out of, if that makes sense. Like Smerdyakov has no real. I don't know if I'd say he has agency in the same way that Iago does. Yeah. Um. uh, uh, yeah. Like Iago also has some complicated stuff about like he's maybe obsessed with Othello in a maybe sexual way, right? He seems to have some weird stuff going on with Cat. Like, yeah, there's some weird.
Moorish and Iago.
Yeah.
There's something there.
Yeah, no, but I like the honestly he's more Smerdyakov is more like the witches within Macbeth, right? Like it's like that's something that's in Ivan to begin with, and they just kind of pull it out of him, and then he does it all. I don't know if I can actually even stay by that now that I'm saying that out loud.
So okay, but what about these ideas that Ivan brings to Alyosha, tries to infect him, tries to infect and does Smerdyakov? It makes me think of the possessed.
Yeah, okay, so that's something I was actually thinking about is like comparing him to Svidrigailov, who is a mirror for Raskolnikov, right? Um, I don't think of Smerdyakov as a. I mean, he. I think what I said earlier, I am convincing myself more of that. He's more like the embodiment of the idea. It's sort of like you're the one who had this idea. I'm just out here making it happen. Like you said, everything is permitted, so therefore I
Right.
should be able to kill this dude, right? And morally get away with it. See? So in that way, I guess he is like a mirror. The difference is that Svidrigailov doesn't do anything because of Raskolnikov. He's more a reflection of what Raskolnikov would become if he went down this path of being this whatever he thinks of the extraordinary man. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I remember there's a line somewhere about how they have their Hamlets and we have our Karamazovs,
Hmm.
right? So there is an intentional, and there is that part from the other reading, right, where they talk about Othello and yeah, so there's embedded in this, every so often that kind of direct reference to a Shakespearean character as a kind of touchstone of whatever is happening. And
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, that definitely seems like the kind of comparison we're supposed to be thinking about. I don't know that um, Iago is a more interesting character because he's kind of this more forceful, passionate kind of manifestation of the evil that's driving forward the plot. Um, Smerdyakov, in some ways, does seem like a more intelligent or um, rational, right? Like we can sort of understand a little bit better what might be motivating him. And certainly the dynamic that unfolds on stage is highly compressed, whereas the dynamics that are happening throughout this book are very elaborate, very, hundreds of pages later, the characters will refer to something that happened, across the span of like 2 pages at the end of a chapter or something, right? So there's this much more uh,
Well,
oceanic quality
yeah.
to the Karamazovs. I mean, they're almost, you almost have to say they're greater than Shakespeare for that reason. I don't know. If that's
Ooh.
allowed.
Yeah. I don't know if that's allowed, but that's pretty. But he's pretty damn close. Uh.
Well, and they're different. He is Dostoevsky is trying to. So he mentions the novelist and sort of imports himself into the novel, and thus does also a Dante sort of move there. But he has Dmitri sort of in a very Socratic way. And I was going to ask whether he's a Socrates. It was Kirillov, by the way, who committed himself killed himself for nihilism.
Mm.
But whether sorry, derailing myself by saying
I.
sorry.
Oh, well, I was just going to go into like the one. I don't feel like we talked a lot about Ivan and Smerdyakov, and the plot of Alyosha really affected me in a positive way with this reading. It was very like, I teach at an all boys school. There's like Alyosha like reunifying this group of young men and helping them like kind of go down this path. And obviously there's the messianic imagery, like he gathers 12 boys together. I'm gonna leave you and then I'll be back, and all this kind of like stuff. But I don't know, it just was like uh yeah, it struck me in a way that reading this book, well, I guess almost 20 years later, when I'm an older man, and have had different experiences, was like very. I used to think about Ivan a lot more, and Ivan's like an idiot, and I much more like and enjoyed Alyosha's character.
Do you think Alyosha redeems the Karamazov name, or
Yeah,
just the
yes,
stage to do so? Yeah.
yes, yeah. I think. I mean, I like if you were to ask me, is this a tragedy comedy? I think you just call it a. It doesn't really fit in any one genre because there's elements of all of it, but like a miracle, I mean, it ends with him talking about a resurrection and this coming together of this group. Probably comedy would be the best. I mean, in terms of like unifying the boys.
Yeah, Zosima was right as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So I I want to, so just finishing the point I was going to make, but also complicating that is, so Dmitri is he being Socratic? And he says, I'm Russian. I don't want to go to America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The woman I love is a Russian woman.
Yeah, yeah.
Also Dostoevsky throwing himself into this text and saying,
Yeah.
I'm a Russian author.
Yeah.
There might be some English author named Shakespeare. There might be, some German author named Goethe. But the whole problem with many of my characters is that they don't know they're Russians and that they don't know that they're Karamazovs. Alyosha does. But is there like a strange sort of like human effigy in the divine circle thing going on here? Because not only is it declaring itself as a Russian novel, but at the end, this resurrection language, this Christian language, it's also a Christian novel. So is he saying, this is Russian, this is Christian, they occupy the same space, they are part of the same thing, they're that second person of the Trinity that somehow is human, somehow is divine, 100% each, sort of transcends logic, but even in this terrible world and even in this story where these terrible things happen and get mentioned, we get even more stories from this this prosecutor, right? About and we haven't even talked about poor Zhushka, who Smerdyakov helped Ilyushka to kill, and then he gets feverish and dies very sadly. So right. So yeah, I mean, comedy in the Dante sense, sure, in the very end of it, but also like masterpiece in that I think he's writing what he thinks is a particularly Russian novel, not trying to make a European novel. Again, because he criticizes, but also making it a Christian novel because he thinks that's even a greater truth, but also a truth that's part of being Russian.
Yeah, it's in The Idiot where they talk about like Russia is the true mother of Christianity, or is that in Demons? I don't remember which one. It's in one of those two.
Well, I was kind of going to say, like, in every book, we get that question that pops up, like, who are the Russian people? What is the Russian culture? So it almost makes me think it's a redemption of the Russian, let's say, culture, or maybe not even a redemption, but
these kids, go Karamazov. It's very Disney-esque, right? 3 cheers for Karamazov, and yes, no, we certainly will be resurrected. Now we get to go eat salmon, and yeah,
Pancakes.
okay, pancakes and salmon are okay right now. It's an old tradition. This is good too. Alyosha assures.
Yeah.
Actually, Wes, you didn't get a chance. You mentioned in text before this that this section. So we didn't talk about Jushka. We also didn't talk about the long bit with Ilyushka and with the kids right at the beginning of this section at all either. So I guess if we're going to end talking about the kids, we should mention that they had that extremely long, like you said, I mean, as promised, several, it seemed, chapters of dealing.
it was
a whole part, right?
It was long enough that I was like, I feel like I should reread this. Like, it's really important.
It's great. I mean, thinking about the question of guilt and responsibility, yes, Smerdyakov teaches how to hurt the dog for sure, and then Ilyushka goes out and finds another dog that looks like the dog, right, and brings that one and has taught it all these tricks to try to cheer up Ilyushka.
Yes.
So I'm getting them mixed up, yeah. But then, the kid is sick in the first place really because of what Mitya did to his father, the whisk broom incident, right? And so you kind of are like tracing back these, and then the father, he has this opportunity to take some money, but he throws it on the ground and jumps on it and grinds it into the dust, right? And so he's kind of responsible for his kid's death. Mitya's kind of responsible. Smerdyakov, and they're all, I mean, each of them is a little bit implicated. And so I mean, it's almost like what happens to Mitya is justified on the basis of how cruel he has been, right? He didn't maybe actually murder, but he as good as murdered, and I think that's also part of what the Russianness of Dostoevsky's Christianity might have at its core, that sense of being guilty for everything before
before everyone.
You're going to get your justice in some fashion.
Your friend's neighbor's wife, that's as good as having done it. Like
very Sermon on the Mount.
But that's interesting that he's ontologically guilty regardless of what he did because of all that he did. So like he had accumulated a certain amount of guilt, and this is just he was due some comeuppance. Well, that's what the defending attorney says, that it would crush him psychologically to be given so much grace, to be exonerated.
Yeah, and he kind of, Mitya in a way comes to that conclusion himself, like because he just kind of accepts it in a fashion.
Yeah, he loses his spirit in sort of a Jesus-like way at the very end.
Well, and I mean, that's while it might be Russian, it's also very to this point of like this is the nexus of all these things. It's also very human to like be living in a life of sin and never receiving any sort of consequence for it is hell. Like
Yeah.
that's a hellish place to be, to like never
Right.
have any accountability for any of your actions. Like that's not a healthy place. Um yeah. Um you mentioned Tolstoy, and it's like this is such a better way of encapsulating what it is to be Russian than anything Tolstoy ever wrote. I mean, it's like you have to read this book and then I'm not that I'm Russian or I really understand it, but like it's like he's telling me what it is and this is showing me what it is, you know?
Right.
Uh and
Also more European in that way.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. Also more aristocratic, you know? Um yeah. It it has also something to do with this notion of like not being able to psychologically understand suffering and yet knowing that you have to suffer. Like that to me is the real like problem of the novel. And really the problem of Dostoevsky's entire works. It's like how do we deal with the fact that we can't avoid this, but it also is terrible that it happens.
Oh yeah, I think that's the question. Um, just to ask a much more ceremonious and yet in some ways unceremonious to hit denotation versus connotation question here. We find ourselves at a moment of a nexus point, as you would say, a point of trivia, a point of demarcation, a crisis point, a point of choice.
Tipping point.
Dostoevsky for so long, and we've
Yeah.
all of his great works together, and we've read many of his minor works together too. And we do still have what is it, House of the Dead, his first work to read, or Poor Folk, sorry. Um, and but then I we need to choose a direction, and I guess we can do that off the camera. And so I guess we'll say bye, and then we can just make these choices, and then we'll just be back.
That's what I prefer it to be a surprise.
Yeah, right.